people delay doing things they don't like for longer than it takes to do them?
I used to define power by the distance between thoughts and reality. Meaning, if you think about somebody who's omnipotent, so if God or the God figure would be omnipotent as he thinks things are. So there's zero space between thoughts and reality. And so if we want to be more godlike in our lives, the distance that we can shrink between wanting to do something or thinking something should be done and it being done is a direct indication of our personal power in our lives. And so that has helped me basically think, don't be a powerless bitch. Like just shrink the gap. And I think that's why a lot of my little like personal hacks of waking up and then trying to shrink the time between when I wake up and when I start working, and shrinking the time between one task and the next task. Like you don't need to take 30 minutes of getting ready to start working. Like you can just start working, because as soon as you get into it, you start pulling the thread and you're like, oh, here it is. And all of the time that I was getting ready to work, I was just using up my best brain power time on things that truly don't move the needle at all. There have been so many times in my life where I knew I needed to do something, and then I filled all this extra time not doing that thing. And then the moment I did it, I was like, wow, that took way less time than I thought it was going to take. And not only that, it took way less time than it took me to delay to actually get to this point. And if I had only started with just doing what I was supposed to do, I could have done 4 or 5 other things that I was also supposed to do by this exact same point. And so thinking about it from that perspective, I've tried to eliminate as much time between I think I should do this thing and beginning doing it. And I think you get this positive reinforcement cycle that occurs every time you start. I call it pulling the thread. It's like, I just need to start pulling the thread. And then all of a sudden what feels really unknown becomes very tangible. And you're like, oh, I understand the 6 problems I have to solve to do this big thing. But now I know the problems. And then it feels like you can wrap your arms around it. And then you can start taking it one bite at a time.
Well, we spoke about this yesterday, the difference between focusing on inputs and focusing on outcomes. Right. Yeah. If you optimize for outcomes, the inputs are always optimized. But if you optimize for inputs, you go, what did I actually get done at the end of the day? So the person that does do the productivity rain dance and it takes ages, and everyone's done this. Everyone's got a blank piece of paper in front of them and they end up washing dishes that they never use. Or, the weirdest tasks become alluring because of that. Focusing on outcomes.
I think that you have to first figure out what the input is that most closely correlates or tracks with the output you want. Mm-hmm. And then you jam as much as you possibly can into inputs. Because if I said, hey, go get me 10 customers, yeah, exactly, you freeze, because it's like, well, what do I do? And so then normally people they skew, like behavior skew. So it's all over the place. It's scattered. Mm-hmm. It's shotguns, sprays. And then they eventually figure out one thing that works. And then it's like, once you hit that, then you just jam that button as hard as you possibly can. And I think that I've been disproportionately successful in different domains in my life by ruthlessly focusing on one input. I mean, even when I was a kid, when I played video games, it's like if you find a spawn point for zombies right before the end of the level, I would just sit there for like 8 hours and just wait for the troll to come up and just slice him again and get my little diamonds and put it in. And I would just do that for hours because I was like, oh, I got to level up my avatar. But I think I play the game of business the exact same way.
Andy Groves says there are so many people working so hard and achieving so little. And that's the lack of correlation between inputs and outcomes.
Yeah. I think the vast majority of business owners, I come from the business perspective, but the vast majority of business owners work a fair amount. They just work on the wrong stuff and they do it the wrong way. And so they get so little for their effort that they wonder when they're at home, empty-handed in bed, why isn't this working when I am working? But if you define work, at least the way I do, which is output. So I define work by output. And in order to get output, it's volume times leverage. So how many times you do the thing times how much you get for each time you do it. And so that is do you work smart or do you work hard? It's you do both. You do as many reps as you possibly can, and you do it with the most leverage possible. So if I make 100 phone calls, the leverage that I can have there would be how skilled I am. So if I make 100 calls, I might get 10 times more. And so I worked more. I had more output than somebody who has less skill. But the only way you get skilled is by doing more inputs, by working more. And so it's this virtuous cycle of doing more and getting better, and then you get more for what you do.
Yeah. Magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding all the time. Every single time that we're not making progress in this way, what is the highest pain task that's in front of me that I've put off the most? It's always that one. It always is. After you spend enough time thinking about work and deconstructing the way that you piece your day and your life together, you sometimes believe that the answer is still out there. And what you actually realize is that you've already learned it. And it's like, it's that quote or that insight or that book. It's one of the first books you read, because all of the big insights from productivity and personal development are the lowest hanging fruit. They're the ones that are repeated across the most books because they're the most reliable, scalable, and robust. It's like, I don't need to be looking out there for most of the new insights. They're just shit that I already learned.
Yeah, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. It's one of my favorites.
Bad things don't come in threes. Bad things happen. People don't know how to cope, and they allow one bad thing to snowball into more. Bad stuff sucks. The only thing worse is letting one bad thing ruin many good things.
Yeah, people don't know how to manage their emotions. I think the more, at least for me, the more I've tried to create space between how I feel and what I do, the more consistent my outcomes have been.
Successful people, this is kind of similar to what you were talking about. Bad things don't come in threes. Successful people see opportunity in every failure. Normal people see failure in every opportunity. Both are right. Only one gets rich.
Yeah, so this has been something I've been thinking about a lot, which is basically the shittiness of stuff, which is when you're growing in a business, it's very painful. When you're stagnating in a business and you're plateaued and you don't know what to do, it's very painful. When you're declining and you also don't know what to do, it's very painful. And so that means that all conditions of reality are painful. And so if pain is a prerequisite for reality, then it means it's just a signal that we are alive. And so in thinking about that, rather than pain as a problem, it is a signal that I'm breathing, and then becomes irrelevant. But I think the ultimate version of the hypertrophy, when the muscle becomes a tendon or it just becomes fused, is when you don't even consider how you feel. It's just not a thought. You just do it. And that was when I kind of refined my kind of theory of living for me, which is that hard work is the goal. And so it's not like work hard so that X, because as soon as you have a so that, then the X is the thing. But if the goal is to work as hard as you possibly can, then the only real output we have is who we become along the way. And so in reframing that, then it's something that I can win or measure myself against every day in real time throughout the day, which is how hard am I working? Because that is the goal. And so when I think about how hard I want to work, the interesting thing about that is that the only person who can judge you on your success is you, because you're the only one who knows how much left in the tank you really had. And the better you get, and you can resonate with this, you start winning exteriorly. And that's when people are like, it felt so empty. It's because they didn't actually work as hard as they could have. They just worked hard enough to beat everyone else. But that discrepancy between how hard you could have worked to work your hardest versus what was required in order to win, to me, that's the opportunity that shifting towards the work being the goal unlocks for you. And I work harder now than I did when I was poor. And I think it's because I've learned to enjoy it.
How do you ensure that the hard work focus doesn't detach you from outcomes and inputs? This seems like there's a little bit of a tension with what we started talking about in the beginning. So
totally.
It's direction over speed is the first one, but we're now talking about maximizing for speed.
Yeah.
So how do we balance direction and speed?
So with the question, if the outcome that we're trying to have is being present, then the outcome actually is irrelevant because it's about how much you empty the tank. If we're talking about the science of achievement, then the outcome does matter, obviously. And so balancing both of those things, which is that if I want to accomplish all my goals, then I need to make sure that my inputs are tied as closely as humanly possible to the outcome. If I want to be satisfied, it doesn't matter at all. And so I think it's marrying those two ideas where the perfect world, in my opinion, would be you work as hard as you possibly can because you thought ahead of time, what is the input that has the closest correlation with the outcome that I want? And then you put your blinders on and you start digging.
We don't rise to the standards we have when others are watching. We fall to the standards we have when no one is watching. The only work that really matters is the work that no one sees. It shows you who you really are rather than who you say you are.
So I think what we're teasing at is authenticity. And so a lot of people feel like imposters because what they think, what they say, and what they do are completely different. But from an operational perspective, because that's how I like to define a lot of words, which is what do I have to do to be that, right? What do I have to do to be authentic? And you can describe someone as authentic by saying, how would you behave if there was no possibility of punishment? And so if you could not be punished at all, that behavior is who you are authentically. And so, in my opinion, our degrees of freedom are predicated on how much, to what extent we act as though we could not be punished. And so if what we want to do and what we do have no possibility of punishment, that is what we are when we are our true selves.
If you want revenge for the bad things that have happened in your life, start with the version of you that hasn't lived up to your potential.
So I think a lot of us have the battle of the other self that we're the lesser version of ourself that we're trying to kill every single day. And so a lot of times we have this desire to point the blame finger externally, but wherever you point the finger of blame, power follows. And so whoever I blame for the life I have is the person who I give all the power over my existence, over my circumstances. And so it hurts, but if you turn the finger inwards and you start saying, I don't like my life. The person that I need to punish or get back at is the real person who got me here, which is me. And so you may be right that other people did certain things or you got dealt a bad hand. It also doesn't matter because the only thing that you can control is obviously the actions that you take. And the only person who's in control of that is you. And so the revenge porn is thinking about what the version of you who got you here did, and then acting in the exact opposite of that as many times as you possibly can. And the pain that you feel by rejecting the thing that you used to do that got you into this bad circumstance, that's the real revenge.
It's kind of like the stoic fork, the dichotomy of control, but it's just taking all of that and just lumping it all on you. Yeah, it's this is kind of the pushback against victimhood culture, that externalizing the locus of control, it is the fault of the politics or the economy, or it's the state of the dollar, or it's the patriarchy, or it's whatever. And he goes, hey, look, you will get 100x, 1000x your returns, placing your efforts to try and change those things on you as opposed to on the world. I think basically the best way to move through the world is to see your entire surroundings as immutable and you as mutable. You're the only mutable thing in the entire world. You're the only thing that can change. Everybody else, people, opinions, places, economy, politicians, policies, all of that, none of that's going to change. You can change. That's it. And then maybe some of the other stuff does, and that would be great.
It's a really interesting concept. So do we accept the world and change ourselves? Or do we change the world and accept ourselves? And so it's a really interesting dichotomy when you ask the question, because both of those sound right. You're like, I should accept myself and change the world. But on the other hand, you're like, wait, no, I should accept the world and change myself.
Yeah.
And so, because they're both pithy.
Yeah.
Pithy
aphorism porn.
Right. And so I think all of it comes down to, when you change yourself, you will change the world because you'll change how you see it.
I think as well, when it comes to accepting yourself, do you want to accept you? Do you want to accept a version of you that you shouldn't accept?
So if I say, is there a version of yourself that's better than you are right now? And most people hopefully would say yes. It's like, great, accept that person. And I think that, to me, when we talk about the authenticity, accepting yourself is accepting the ideal that we can live up to. And that is what we accept, not the shitty version of that we are today. And I think that marries both sides of the argument.
Jimmy Carr broke my brain with this one. Everyone is jealous of what you've got. No one is jealous of how you got it.
People have a harder time accepting that someone can just work all the time and truly love it. And I define that by there's nothing else I would rather do at any time. And so for me, I feel like I exercise absolute freedom in my life. And freedom is reinforcing for all species, dogs, cows, fish, humans. Freedom is one of the most positively reinforcing thing that people have, that everyone wants freedom.
Everybody wants to be able to say, fuck you.
Right. But once you say fuck you, you have to do something, because you can't just stand there and saying fuck you over and over again for hours for the rest of your life. You start to do something, and that thing that you choose to do after you say fuck you is what you want to do.
There's a Tim Cook internal memo that he sent. There's a saying that if you do what you love, you will never work a day in your life. At Apple, I learned that is a total crock. You will work harder than you ever thought possible, but the tools will feel light in your hands.
So good.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah.
Chef's kiss, Tim Cook.
I feel like you crushed that one.
Yeah, being able to continue doing something without seeing the results of your work is one of the best competitive advantages, because everybody else is feeling the same discomfort that you are. Everybody else is going, I don't know if this is going to work, and this is hard, and why is no one telling me that I'm doing a good job, and fuck, another day with no plays, that's stupid.
The leading indicator of a successful person is the ability to act without anything happening. And when you continue down that path, it happens slower than you expect, and then faster than you can imagine. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the part that everyone misses, is they expect the faster than they can imagine, and they imagine really big. And so then their expectations are really big, really fast, but they take the intensity and they don't apply it to a timeline that's appropriate.
This is from Mark Manson. Why I hate being around negative people. Being an asshole is a weak person's idea of strength. Complaining is their connection. Never let yourself be held back by other people's fears. People criticize what they were afraid to do themselves because bold action reminds them of their own inaction. If you're afraid to be criticized, why do you care about the opinions of those who are too timid to do it themselves? If you are the criticizer, does tearing down someone who has the courage you lack make you better?
Yeah. People criticize because it helps them justify the risks they chose not to take, in the hopes that it'll dissuade you from doing it so that you can be in the exact same position as them, which then justifies that they made the right call.
But because, at least for me, I always have such inherent uncertainty of my own opinions, and such a sense that everybody else is balanced and actually knows what they're doing, that I give undue weight to the criticisms of others. Oh, maybe they are right. Maybe it is stupid for me to stop drinking. Maybe this does make me boring. Maybe it is pointless for me to do. Like, who even knows if meditation works? Fuck Sam Harris, right? Like, all of these doubts that start to creep in, and that, like we were saying before, this is the discomfort that everybody feels, whether you're launching a business or doing personal development or doing all the rest of it. And as opposed to thinking about it as a bug, think about it as a feature. And as opposed to thinking about it as something that's a personal curse that's difficult, think about it as the selection criteria that everybody has to get over. That's the reason why so few people are equanimous and actually have peace in their mind, because meditation is hard and everyone thinks, am I doing it right? This kind of sucks, and I'm twitchy and I'm tired today. Why are so few people in shape? Because going to the gym and sticking to the gym is difficult. Maybe it's a tiny bit easier for some people that like it than others, but for most people, most of the time, it's really, really hard. Thinking about the challenges that you need to face, it's just a selection criteria. The cost of doing business, right? This is just the cost of doing business, and I need to pay it.
It's rarely the information or the intensity that makes things hard. It's the sticking with it that makes it hard. And so the desire that we have to quit is simply breaking the consistency. And so that's why consistency has always been the hardest thing for most people to achieve. But the intensity of what you have to do to be successful is much lower than most people expect.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes they suffer significantly more in a short period of time than is required to be successful over a much longer period of time with a much lower intensity. And so it's just like if you walk for 5 minutes a day, you're going to get, 50% of the health benefits, probably more than that, I'm sure, of just even exercising. You add 10 years to your life if you walked 5 or 10 minutes a day. And the path of personal development is befriending uncertainty. And so I obviously sit from the entrepreneurial perspective, but almost all decisions that you make in the beginning, you have incomplete data and you have to make decisions anyways. And so it's growing comfortable with taking your best bad guess and being directionally correct rather than searching for a perfect answer, because a perfect answer assumes perfect information, which you can only have after you begin. And so in some ways, making a decision is the perfect answer so that you can get the information
feedback
to then improve the quality of the decision later. And I think that one loop is what a lot of people miss out on, is they obsess for years sometimes on the perfect pick, the perfect business, the perfect job, the perfect mate, when most of the times beginning each step eliminates the next step, which means the information, the feedback that you get from walking gives you more about where to walk than trying to sit at the beginning in the darkness and pick a direction.
Well, it's the difference as well, I think, between people who are super advanced, super developed, super far down the line and people who are beginning. It's like, dude, what are you risking by trying to do this thing? For you, it's fine for you to spend 18 months negotiating with Sam on the school deal.
Yeah.
But if you are yet to do any business, that's probably not necessarily the right way to go about things. Tim Ferriss says, in the short term, your success depends on your intensity. In the long term, your success depends on your consistency. Reminder for anyone internally debating weekend plans. If you don't want to go, don't go. If they care whether you go or not, they don't care about you. And if they care about you, they don't care if you go or not. Just because you have free time doesn't mean anyone who asks for it is entitled to it.
In the beginning, if you don't have money, the only thing you have is time. And so that is the only thing it's the only currency you can spend to improve yourself or get closer to your goals. And so if that's the one currency you have, then why on earth would you give it away?
I think it's genuinely right to say that your calendar is a better measure of your wealth than your bank account.
It's also the easiest way to know where someone's going to be in 5 years or even a year.
How so?
You just see where they're investing their time, and you can predict more accurately what their life is going to look like in a year based on what they're doing today. And it's a good thing, for us. It's hard for me not to put the business stuff into it, but a reminder that the life that I'm living today is a result of the work that I did 6 and 12 months ago. And so if you were to look at my calendar 6 and 12 months ago, then you might extrapolate out to what I'm doing today. But just like people want the immediate reward, they also see their current condition as a result of the behavior they're doing today, it's not at all. And so that's why I think having, in some ways, a very vivid imagination of, this is where I think the benefit of, quote, visualization comes into play. I don't see it as much as a benefit for I have to imagine this thing to happen, but I think it's more powerful to think, I'm doing this thing today and I'm imagining it happening. So it's an approximation of the feedback loop that you want to have. And so it helps you substitute and get through the period where nothing's actually happening.
Give me a tangible example.
I think about everything in terms of skills. And I have more or less divorced myself from the words like feelings, psychology, intuition, whatever. I've just taken it out of my vocabulary and character traits and tried to focus ruthlessly on what are the actions that I can take to become patient. And if you say, hey, be patient, what does someone do, right? They have to figure out what to do in the meantime. That's the definition of patience. If you say, hey, be more charismatic, the problem with that directive is that it's a bundled term. And so I say charismatic, but what it really means is 12 skills underneath of it. That means that when you walk into a room, stand up straight. When you walk into a room, look everyone in the eyes. When you walk into a room, announce yourself, speak louder, shake people's hands and look at them while they're talking. When someone talks, nod your head. If you do all of these 12 behaviors or 15 behaviors, people will begin to describe you as charismatic. And in the path of personal development, we want to become more of these things, but we haven't chunked down the bundled term into the series of behaviors that create the description that people will then call us later. And I think by breaking things down, then it's not like, oh, I'm just not that insert character trait. It's really, oh, I have not mastered these 12 skills. And so by doing that, it demystifies.
Much more precise.
Exactly. This is from a business perspective, also really good for training employees. So like, for example, on our team, I was like, Caleb was the first person who did video with me that I ever enjoyed. And so I was like, why? And then somebody else came in and I was like, I'm not having as much fun in these sessions. And I'd like to recreate the conditions of success. And so how can I make it so that I
operationalize fun?
Exactly. And
the most Alex Hormozi thing I've ever heard. Hey guys, let's operationalize fun for a moment.
And so we had to, but then this is the part that everyone misses, is that you then have to look with a microscope and say, what are all the little things that Caleb does that other people don't do? And so it turned out when he was behind the camera, he would be nodding his head. And if I said a banger line, he would stick his thumb out. And so I would get these many positive reinforcement loops while I was recording. And then as soon as I was done, he would come over and be like, dude, that was fire. And then he would take out his phone and have all of these really interesting follow-ups because I could see that he was actively listening and he had thoughts. And so then when we retrained the team, we said, hey, when Alex is talking, nod your head slowly so he sees that you're actively listening. If he says something cool, do one of these, give him a thumbs up. And then all of a sudden, my recording sessions without Caleb became as good as my recording sessions with Caleb. And we operationalized Calebism, right? And so I could say, I just need you to be more like Caleb, but that's not helpful to somebody. But if I said, I need you to do all these things, then I can operationalize that. The reason I'm hitting on this so hard is because this has been such a core change in how I see the world. And it has been so useful in terms of bending reality to what I would like it to be, because there's this huge disconnect between what people want, how they describe what they want, and what it takes for that to occur. And by being able to look with detail about the character traits or the things that people who are better than you at a certain thing do, you can then stop being like, man, people think I'm a dick. It's like, well, if someone says stop being a dick, not helpful. I mean, good to know that whatever I'm doing is not working, but doesn't give me any active directions. And so we just try to break down adacquisition.com, but in general, and for myself, what is the 18 things that I have to do? And oftentimes it's significantly more things, but they're also much easier than you think. If I just said, I need you to nod your head while you're going on camera, it's not that complicated to understand. And so when you break it down that way, all of a sudden you wrap your arms around it and you're like, oh, so this is what it takes in order for me to be an exceptional videographer. This is what it takes for me to be an exceptional podcaster. I'm sure, and we call it like, this is why I love living by checklists. But right now, if I were to say, hey, what makes a good podcast? You'd be like, probably about 128 things or more, right? But everyone on the outside says, you're so natural on camera. You ask such thought-provoking questions. Like, man, you just get the best guests, right? And you're like, sure. And so but the thing is I think this is the mysticism. This is the unknown that the beginners or the people who are at the very beginning of their path don't understand, is that there is no magic. There is no mysticism. There is no spirituality around this. Everything comes down to behavior. And by doing that, you can take out all of the hullabaloo, all of the voodoo that unfortunately is so prevalent on social media. And so when you hear the podcast clips and whatever of people saying you just need to be more this, if they haven't described it by a behavior, it is useless. And so this has allowed me to also separate signal from noise when I'm consuming content in general, or if I want to learn something, I'm immediately thinking, well, what does this mean that I have to do? And if someone can't break it down into the behaviors, then they don't know either. And they may be very good at the thing, but they may be very bad at teaching it. And being able to separate those two skills, because those are skills too, being able to transfer a skill is a skill, will allow you to audit who you're listening to so that you can get the highest return on your effort, because then you know that you're doing activities that lead to the outcome that you want.
Do not sacrifice the latter for the former.
What's wild about the fear that people have when they're starting out is that they say things like, I have nothing going for me. I have no advantages. I have nothing to my name. I have no money. I have no network. I have no resources. But using Rory Sutherland's reframing, it also means that you have nothing to lose, which makes you incredibly dangerous. And I think people wildly underestimate how many shots on goal you can take when you have nothing to lose. Whereas when someone has something to lose, they have to be more and more selective about the shots they take. And so you have the perfect conditions for taking risk, because the worst case scenario is baseline, is where you're currently at.
Correct. Yeah.
And so that
your
means,
downside is this.
which means that it's like going to the casino and playing craps, but they say that you can just keep playing until you win. But people are afraid to roll.
Anybody that spends enough time crafting words and thinking about them precisely ends up having a very accurate view of the world, because all of the fluffiness that comes about, we mediate our experience through language. And then what? You've got a shit-eating grin on your face.
Oh, I've just got so many.
Okay, well, pick one of your favorites.
I'll do three of them. Two of them that are related, and then a third one. All right. So this will be really good. This will be nasty for the people who are listening at home. So learning means same condition, new behavior. So phone rings, you answer the phone, you say ABC. I say, cool, read this script instead that says DEF. Phone rings, same condition. You say DEF, you have learned. Same condition, new behavior. Intelligence is rate of learning. It's speed. It's a measurement of speed. And so it means how many times do you need to be exposed to the same condition in order to change your behavior? If I teach someone something, that script, and then on the first try, they say DEF, and someone else, it takes 5 tries for them to say DEF, they are not as intelligent as the first person. Here's why this is interesting. Every person who's listening to this right now has listened to 1,000 fucking podcasts, and they're in the exact same condition, and yet they have not changed their behavior, which means 1, they have not learned, and 2, they are dumb. Which also means that if you can control your behavior, you can also control how intelligent you are. And so if you want to be a smart cookie, then it means that you just decrease the amount of times that you do not change your behavior under the same conditions. And so when I think about this, when I teach my team, when I teach anyone, I think in these conditions. And so every time you watch or you consume a piece of content, you read a book, if you think, what behavior am I going to change as a result of this? If the answer is nothing, you wasted your time and you pretended to be learning, but you were really entertaining yourself. And so that frame has been incredibly helpful for me to speed up how quickly I take action, because I don't want to be a dodo bird. So that's two different ones, learning and intelligence. One that I've been thinking a lot about with Dr. K and I, we go back and forth, is motivation. So I'll tell you a story and then I'll bring it up, I'll bring it around. So I was at an event and a young lady said, Alex, can you just give me 60 seconds of motivation? And of course it's like, dance monkey dance. And so I took a deep breath and I was like, define motivation. And she just like melted. She had no idea, right? I was like, so you want me to answer a question or make a statement about something that you can't even define. And so how would you have any idea of whether or not I actually did it? And so then I probably gave her the answer she really wanted, which was, let me define motivation for you. So motivation is the equal opposite of deprivation. So we are most motivated when we are deprived of something. I'm most motivated to sleep when I'm sleep deprived. I'm most motivated to eat when I'm deprived of food. I'm most motivated to have sex when I haven't had sex in a while. Now, that logic carries for physiological needs. But then when you get into psychological things or or intangible constructs. So like, let's think about money. By that same logic, you'd think, oh, poor people should be more motivated because they're deprived of money, but that we don't see that in reality. Many poor people are not that motivated. So it would then follow, and I've seen some incredibly rich people who are wildly hungry for money. And so then it would follow that the deprivation comes from our reference point because money is intangible. And so it's how much do we perceive our deprivation around money? And so if all of my friends are billionaires and I'm worth $100 million, then I have a $900 million deficit that I have to come up. I'm $900 million poorer than the person who just is at $5,000 a month who wants to make $10,000 a month. I'm more motivated to make money than they are because I'm more deprived of it. And so in thinking about this, I then think, okay, what am I deprived of that motivates me to go get it? And also, when I want to try and judge the behavior of others or predict their behavior, I have to think, what things are they deprived of? Because I'll have a much stronger predictive power than trying to say, how do I motivate this person? Look at what they lack.
It is astounding how many people want to be spectacular in life, but also want to fit in and be normal. Like, by being normal, you are, by definition, aiming for average. Normal people get normal results. Weird people get weird results. You literally can't do what everyone else does and not expect to get what everyone else has. By doing what everyone else does, you guarantee average results.
It's your brother, your mom, your friend, the one comment they're going to say, you've changed. Why are you doing another kick like this? Oh, you're going to try that now. Okay, here we go again. And the thing is that it's not about them being right or wrong. Again, it's about how right and how wrong they could be. And so, for example, let's say you wanted to start a podcast in the past and you did 3 episodes and then you fell off. And then they think, I told you so. Stop with these dreams. Stop with this crazy content stuff. You're never going to become an influencer or whatever your goal is. Replace influencer with whatever your thing is. The thing is that you are still closer having done 3 than having done 0. And so it's just about directional correctness and realizing that criticizers are more often correct, but when it matters most, incorrect. And so this is where frequency and intensity become flipped. And so the problem is you have a bet that you take, you make 3 podcasts, and you didn't stick with it. And so then criticizer gets 1 point. But you lost nothing. You maybe even gained a little bit of skill. And you gain some experience, which means you're actually still better off than you were when you started. So it is a 0-loss game by choosing to begin.
That's the thing about cynics. Right 99% of the time and wrong 100% of the time.
I use this example because I think it really drives it home. So if you have judgmental parents or judgmental friends or judgmental whatevers, and you date people and you bring them home, if they say, I don't think this is the girl for you, they're right every single time your entire life, except for the one person that you decide to marry. And then they are absolutely wrong at the time that it mattered most. And the thing is they get to say on your 6th girlfriend and 7th girlfriend and 8th girlfriend, because let's face it, you've been alive for a while. I have a perfect guess. I'm right 100% of the time. We'll see how long this one lasts. And 2 years in, they're like, see, you finally broke up with her. I told you at the beginning it wasn't going to last. Well, it never fucking lasts except for the one that's going to stick. Duh. And the business never works until it's the one that does. And the episode doesn't take off except for the one that does. And whether it's 10 or 10,000, eventually one does, because when you do more, you get better at doing.
Which is why not quitting is the best skill.
And the only thing that matters. Because by default, with an infinite game perspective, which I encourage everyone to have, the point of the game is to keep the game going. And if you think about the difference between winners and losers, winners define themselves by what they made happen, and losers define themselves by what happened to them. What's interesting about and I don't like using the word psychology, but I'll say what's interesting about humans is that our ability to endure is very robust if we know that we'll make it out. And so they've done mice studies where they drop the mouse in and then they let it drown and it drowns really fast. And then they drop a mouse in, and then before it gets to the point where it drowns, they pick it up and then they put it back in. And the second time they put it in, it can last like 20 times longer.
I think for the stats is something around will drown in less than an hour. If it's taken out, dried off, and allowed to relax, it'll swim for a day.
An absurd amount different. And so if I were to say, hey, I need you to hold your breath, but I don't tell you how long, 20 seconds in, you might be thinking, this is stupid. Is he going to stop? Is he going to wait for me to pass out? And all these stupid thoughts go into your mind. But if I say, I need you to hold your breath for 3 minutes, your lungs might burn, but you can see that there's this end that's coming. The difficulty with personal development and entrepreneurship is that you don't know when the end is coming, but you still need to fight like the second mouse who gets out, gets dried off, and gets put back in. And the only certainty that I can give you is that it's the same thing that every other mouse, every other person who got through that period went through. And you won't die. And if you do die, you won't care because you'll be dead. And so, best case, you win. Worst case, it won't matter. So I'll say two things that might be helpful. One is, you obviously know my stance if you're listening to this on work-life balance, but maybe as a concession for you, your work-life balance obsession may just be too narrowly focused on the present and not extended into seasons. And so you can have work-life balance where I work for 3 years and then I have a more chill year. And I think that most people think about work life in terms of their split of the day rather than their split of the year or the decade. And I think that you can have a much better outcome on both sides if you were to split it up on a longer time horizon.
Controversial take. You really can solve a lot of male problems by getting in shape and making money. You still have problems. They're just smaller and you have more resources to handle them. The world is there for the taking for anyone who can learn from their mistakes, do what they say they were going to do, and stick with it, even if it's not sexy. What used to make a man acceptable now makes you extraordinary. The bar for winning has never been so low.
It's so much easier to beat everyone else because most people are overweight, they're distracted, they're poor, they have so few skills because it has never been easier to start a business, to make money, to get in shape. It's just also never been easier to do nothing. And so in a world where it's never been easier to do nothing, doing something becomes extraordinary.
How to avoid tons of problems in life. Go to bed on time. What are some of the other behaviors that fit in that category, do you think?
People think I have to eat healthy and it's this big amorphous thing. But if we chunk it down, it means that you need to pick 2 things that you like to eat in the morning that have the macros that you need to hit. And you can try as many times as you want because you only need 1 or 2 that you actually like and then you can stick with it. This
is one of the best insights that you had about diet, which is people overcomplicate trying to deconstruct what a diet consists of. But if you actually look at what you eat across a year, it's probably 5 meals on rotation, maybe less. I think I've probably got 3 good meals in my locker. You know, my Gordon Ramsay would be fucking ashamed of us coming from the same country. So, okay, we'll just optimize those 3 meals or those 5 meals.
And that's it. And the thing is that a lot of personal development things, business things are a lot like that, where they feel like an elephant when you are trying to break down this mat. Like, I have to learn nutrition. There's 5 meals, 10 meals max that you eat 90% of the time. You just need to shift the dynamic of those meals.
Even the restaurants that you go to, even the way that you order your food in the restaurants.
That's it. And so that would be one that I would say is a super high leverage. One thing you can do is just change the 3 to 5 meals that you eat most commonly to be the ones that are more aligned with what you want.
And go to bed on time.
And go to bed. I mean, shoot, if you go to bed on time and you do that,
King of the world.
King of the world. Yeah.
So Jean-Paul Sartre, someone screenshotted this from a book. I have no idea what the book is, but it's a motherfucker. I have led a toothless life. A toothless life. I have never bitten into anything. I was waiting. I was reserving myself for later on, and I have just noticed that my teeth have gone.
A lot of people wait for perfect conditions to start, but don't realize that starting is the perfect condition. Waiting to begin never got anyone anywhere. It's never been easier to get in muscle than it was 10 years ago. It's never been easier to make money than it was 10 years ago, but it'll also never be easier than it is right now. It'll only get harder. And so that's actually like a pretty strong impetus to do it now. It'll literally never get easier.
Alex Hormozi, ladies and gentlemen. Dude. Yeah.